Stepping from our ordinary world into the fantastical, Immersive XP explores the weird and wonderful imaginations behind a diverse range of themed experiences. From virtual reality to escape rooms to live-action roleplay, nothing is off the table. We'll take a deep dive into what makes these adventures worth attending and which ones to avoid. Join me on a journey to explore the extraordinary and meet the people who make dreams a reality. Hello, welcome back to another episode of Immersive XP. I'm Taylus Ford, your non-binary host based in Southern California. Seamstress by trade, silly little guy by trauma. Favorite Disney movie? The Emperor's New Groove.
Boom, baby!
Fun fact of the week. DreamWorks was acquired by NBC Universal in 2016, which is why you'll see many characters such as Kung Fu Panda, Trolls, How to Train Your Dragon, and more in the Universal's theme parks. The movie that really prospered both in the park and in the theaters was Shrek, released in 2001. What most people don't know is that Shrek was the undesirable film to be part of if you worked at DreamWorks. With its unusual take on fairy tales, unattractive main characters, issues with casting, and low budget, everyone expected it to be a flop. To those animators working on The Prince of Egypt at the same time, they feared making a mistake. Failure meant being punished to the dungeons to work on Shrek. While the term "get Shrek'd" has been used in meme culture, the term originated in 1995 when such punishment occurred. Despite the negative work environment, shutdowns and animation changes, and recasting, Shrek and its sequels have become some of the highest-grossing animated films of all time. I'm sure a lot of people are kicking themselves now for not being so lucky to get Shrek'd. This week's episode is a Gimmick quest, which is any experience using a pre-existing intellectual property to get people in the door. This one is going to be a little bit different because I'm talking about immersive experiences and comparing them. I'll be discussing Universal Studios' Hollywood FanFest and Disney After Dark Star Wars Night at Disneyland. Universal has had after-hours events in the past with Horror Nights, but this is a unique experience, tried to compete with Disneyland for a family-friendly event. Let's see how well they did. First up, Star Wars Night at Disneyland. This event was on select Tuesday and Thursday evenings, starting with April 8th and ending on May 6th. With one exception, of course, Star Wars Day, which took place on May 4th on a Sunday. May the 4th be with you. Prices were $169 to $189 depending on the day, and sadly no discount for annual pass holders. Excuse me, magic key holders. So, what does your ticket include? While the event officially starts at 9 p.m. and goes until 1 a.m., you'll have the option to arrive early at 6 p.m. You receive a commemorative lanyard and map upon entry. The map contains all the info on specialty foods and drinks only available for the evening, along with photo op locations and special activities. Starting with the food. While there were too many things to try in one evening, and unfortunately most of the exclusive options were not suitable for my diet, I did want to mention the ones that I tried and give some shout-outs to my favorite ones just based on the appearance. I was lucky enough to get a walk-up reservation at Oga's Cantina, which is the only place to get an alcoholic beverage in Galaxy's Edge. I have long wanted an alcoholic version of the park's blue milk and finally had my dreams come true. This included rum and was topped with fluffy whipped cream, passion fruit jellies, and a guava rim. It was everything I could have hoped for, and I would definitely buy this at a regular bar, even if I would look a little ridiculous. For a small bite, my rogue companion tried the John-Sear System Triangle, which is basically Japanese onigiri, with rice, spam, edamame, quinoa, furikake, and wasabi teriyaki sauce. All the other food I ate was from Galaxy's Edge, but from their usual menu to suit my dietary restrictions. My shoutouts to the desserts I wanted to try but never got around to it. The Galactic Princess Sundae because it was just ice cream with 2 cinnamon rolls on the either side to look like Princess Leia. A classic. The Ube and Pineapple Crescent Sundae by Dole Whip, which I'm just a sucker for anything ube, and I hope they bring it back as a regular flavor at the Dole Whip Cafe. I could also not go without mentioning the Dagobah Bites beignets. Definitely a tongue twister, which were matcha beignets in the shape and color of Yoda with a matcha dipping sauce. A real way to my heart is beignets, and I regret missing out. Next, the photo ops. While the professional photographs from Disneyland, also known as PhotoPass, is an additional charge on an average Disney day, this time it was included. Special backdrops were placed around the park for pictures with your favorite characters not usually available. For example, Queen Amidala, Anakin Skywalker, Darth Maul, Han Solo, Sabine Wren, Hera Syndulla, Chopper, and many more fan favorites. In addition to the characters, there were other photo ops so you can focus more on your own costumes throughout the park. My personal favorites were the Greetings From postcards that featured iconic locations in the Star Wars universe. I personally took pictures from the Greetings From Hoth postcard and pretended to look really cold and miserable. Other spots included iconic thrones, speeder bikes, a wall of lightsabers, and other Jedi or Sith-themed walls. Special activities included lightsaber lessons, a mini resistance show under the Millennium Falcon, lightsaber dueling, a cantina band, costume gatherings, a Skywalker projection show, and a DJ party happening all night long. Personally, I didn't feel like many of these activities were far off from the things that happened during the day. The mini resistance show and the Skywalker projection show, both located at the Millennium Falcon, felt the most unique. It did feel special doing it with so many other Star Wars enthusiasts, and there were definitely changes to the usual programming. But it did feel a little underwhelming. In addition to the activities and food, limited merch was available that had either been discontinued in the past or was available only through this event. Everything was incredible, such as the stunning jewelry, limited edition pins, and lightsabers from beloved characters. Things I liked. Mostly I enjoyed the joy and amazing costumes from all the attendees. While you can always dress in Star Wars costumes on an average day in the park, this was an opportunity to cosplay as characters which normally is only allowed for children. I brought out my original Renaissance Jedi since I didn't get around to wearing it this year at the Renaissance Fair. I also loved that all the lines for the rides and the entire park were a walk-on with no wait. I also appreciated that I could order exclusive food ahead of time starting at 8 p.m. It made the evening a lot smoother to plan around. Things I didn't like. While I'm a huge fan of Star Wars, I feel like I would have enjoyed a Disney After Dark event a lot more if I had done one of their broader themes, such as Pride or 90s Night. Galaxy's Edge is one of my favorite places in Disneyland, but it was impossible to move around with numerous lines for photo ops, merchandise lines, and crowds waiting for shows. If you needed to get to the other side, tough luck. You need to go all the way around. It also felt very inefficient that during the transition period of kicking everyone out of the park who was not part of the event, staff wouldn't allow people onto the ride lines and into most stores. Even with my Star Wars Night badge, they told us we had to wait. The early check-in time felt a little wasted. Now on to Universal FanFest. This event took place on Friday through Sunday evening, starting with April 25th and ending on May 18th. Prices were $74 with additional add-ons for early access, skipping the line, and private tours. AAA also had a discount for this event, which I used to my benefit. With FanFest being brand new, what was different than an average day? The event started at 7 p.m. and ended at 2 a.m. While a few rides were open all night, a majority closed at 10 p.m. or midnight. FanFest touted brand new immersive experiences from fandoms you love, like Star Trek, Dungeons & Dragons, Back to the Future, One Piece, and Jujutsu Kaisen. They also had new photo ops and new activities for existing features such as Wicked and Super Mario World. New pop-up restaurants for each of the new fandoms appeared with themed food and drinks, along with more items appearing in other areas. Starting with the food and drinks. Again, there were way too many things to try in one evening, and most I couldn't eat with my dietary restrictions. I'll give a small overview of each of the new restaurants and what I did eat. Star Trek had both its own cafe and bar directly next to each other. Quark's Cafe was available for both daytime attendees and FanFest attendees and had a variety of fried foods and a couple cute desserts. The 10 Forward Bar had both cocktails and mocktails that were themed after various characters. While I didn't have a chance to try any, I was recommended by the other patrons that the tea, Earl Grey, hot or cold cocktail was a personal favorite. I'm always a sucker for a tea-themed drink. Back to the Future had its own Mel's Diner that was also available in the day. You could get a classic patty melt, pot pie, milkshake, and other diner foods. One Piece had all its themed food as various spins on Mexican dishes at Sanji's Galley. Additional soft drinks and super cute desserts were definitely a fan favorite with attendees. The special Thousand Sunny Donut was made by the infamous Voodoo Donuts. Jujutsu Kaisen had a small concession cart that was repurposed to host 3 new desserts and a new strawberry frozen drink. This was definitely the least impressive of the options. My personal favorite and the place I spent all my money on was at the Dungeons & Dragons First Roll Tavern. While the decor and set design wasn't as impressive as the Star Trek bar, I've been a D&D player since high school and I couldn't pass it up. I was very impressed with how reasonable the pricing was for each of the food items considering the usual upcharge for theme parks. I got one of each of the food items, the Hunter's Mark, a beef arugula and cheese roll, the Beholder's Brew Fondue, a chopped tavern loaf with beer fondue, and the Traveler's Rations, which was a mini charcuterie with dried fruit, crackers, cheese, honeycomb, and dried meats. Honestly, the Traveler's Rations was the most surprising of the 3. For $11, it came in a cute little to-go container with the D&D logo on top, which is a great way to have something to snack on in line. I have definitely spent 3 times the amount on a charcuterie in a restaurant that has had way less variety than this. Also, another favorite of mine in a charcuterie is honeycomb. We also tried 2 drinks, the Eldritch Blast, which was a green vodka-based drink with all the green flavors, apple, kiwi, and lime. It was topped with edible glitter and kiwi popping bubbles. While I understand ice is what fills up a cup, I've noticed theme parks doing something a little taboo with the popping bubble craze. You need to either provide a thick boba straw with drinks or no ice. You can't easily drink the popping bubbles without a full face of ice. Aside from that, the Eldritch Blast was pretty yummy, and the extra aesthetic flair is great for a magic spell-themed drink. The other drink I tried was the Good Berry, which was a blackberry lavender drink with a white rum base. It also had a stick of rock candy on top, which made it a drink and a dessert. While on paper this drink had all the things I love, none of the flavors really stood out. It was overall pretty bland, but I did like the rock candy addition as a little treat. Now on to the individual experiences with the companion photo ops nearby. Starting with Star Trek, Red Alert. Come aboard the Enterprise in the year 2403 as it is anchored at the Starfleet Museum. While it starts off as a normal tour, something is slowly shutting down the power and wreaking havoc on the ship. You are sent from room to warn the crew. The experience ends in the real bridge used in the TV shows and films of the Enterprise. A brand new species reveals itself to everyone and apologizes for the inconveniences caused. Red Alert is absolutely stunning and combines both things made for FanFest and screen-use props. Almost all the cast has prosthetic makeup work with screen-accurate costuming. I wasn't a huge fan of the premise only because you were rushed from room to room without being able to admire any of the sets or characters for very long. As far as immersive experiences go, it was beautiful but lacked storytelling nuance. Near the themed restaurants was a bridge chair photo op, which was a fan favorite for sure. Next, Back to the Future, Destiny Hill Valley. Using the studio tour trams to go to the lower lots, you were transported back in time to 1955. You were warned by Doc Brown on the tram ride to make sure not to use any modern-day slang and to not interfere with events that can create a time paradox. Good luck with that. Out of the hundreds of people, most of them are going to screw up. Arriving in a reproduction of Hill Valley, you'll spot iconic scenes from the Back to the Future movie. To summarize what exactly this immersive experience is, the major events of the film are played on repeat every 40 minutes. You can talk to each of the cast members if you like, but the responses are going to be pretty generic like an NPC in a video game. You really have no effect on how the evening plays out. Other musical performances, carnival foods, and a DeLorean photo op with a real dog also fill the space if you don't want to follow the familiar movie plot. Similar to the Red Alert walkthrough, the sets were so well curated, but the concept itself lacked something. A lot of it felt like a casting issue. They tried to cast people who looked like the Back to the Future cast, but didn't have a lot of roleplay and improv experience. So much of the work was put into being a full production, but would have made more sense as a theater production. Sets include real flame fire tracks, a reproduction of Courthouse Square, a gas station, the Under the Sea dance, and more. A major complaint I had about the location of the experience was, since it was at the lower lot, there was a wind tunnel created in between the buildings. It was so cold and windy that I had no interest in staying very long. Luckily, trams were available at any time, which included more Back to the Future history to listen to on the way back to the park. One Piece, Grand Pirate Gathering, was similar to a mini street fair. Cast members were dressed up as iconic characters from the anime to take pictures with, as well as unique merchandise to buy, and special wanted poster character stations were $45 to $65. The Jujutsu Kaisen show was probably the biggest letdown of FanFest. Featured in the DreamWorks Theater, the waiting room pre-show gives a pretty good summary of what the characters are like. While I have no knowledge about the anime, I was honestly pretty excited about the premise based on the introduction. I didn't feel lost or out of the loop. Well, all in Japanese, English subtitles were below. The show itself was clearly meant for a theater in Universal Studios Japan based on the references made and the tiny projection. What I love about the DreamWorks Theater is that they use the entire theater for storytelling, so sitting anywhere is a delight. For the Jujutsu Kaisen show, it looked decent only if you sat in the front few rows. It was a strangely static show that looked more like a side-scroller video game. I'm very into anime, but the story for the main show was pretty boring. The animated pre-show made me want to watch the anime, and the main show made me quickly change my mind. It didn't really feel like a necessary addition to the FanFest lineup. A small addition to the Super Mario World was a mini scavenger hunt that let you collect stickers on a paper headband that you can take home. After collecting them all, you can get an exclusive picture with a different colored Yoshi than the normal green one. Last but definitely not least, Dungeons & Dragons: Secrets of Waterdeep. I loved this immersive experience so much, I went through it multiple times. Patrons are sent in groups of up to 20 to follow two members of the Harpers, a heroic spy network. One, a magical tiefling, and the other, a dwarf bard. In order to save Waterdeep, you need to steal from the infamous beholder, Xanathar. Looking for magical objects, avoiding dragons, destroying enemies, and solving puzzles, this mini-adventure has got it all. This was definitely the most immersive and unique experience of the FanFest lineup. Each room was even more beautiful than the last, with multiple Easter eggs for eagle-eyed D&D fans. But as with all the other immersive experiences at FanFest, the set, props, and costuming came first before anything else. The plot was hard to follow and overly complicated. It seemed like excuses to show off special effects rather than making much sense. Don't get me wrong, I loved the special effects, but it was more like watching another play than being part of the story. Another complaint was that since the actors guide you through the experience on a rotating track, they didn't have microphones attached to them. Instead, they had to awkwardly stand near pre-set up microphones hidden in burlap sacks and fake baskets of fish. Also, depending on the actors you had for the tiefling and bard, it really changed the energy of the adventure. The two I started with had amazing chemistry and had more witty banter that they made with the patrons. The other two felt a little more forced and awkward in their roles. The real stars of the show, though, were the animatronic Mimic, with full rows of teeth, and the absolutely humongous Beholder puppet built by the Jim Henson Studio. I would linger as long as I could just to stare at how beautifully built the Beholder was. Pictures and videos do not properly describe how large he looks in real life. While the Dungeons & Dragons experience was by far my favorite, this felt more like a blueprint for the start of an incredible experience. With tweaks in the plot, smaller party sizes, casting adjustments, and different use of microphones, this has the bones for a long-running show. I would love to see more Dungeons & Dragons experiences with this level of detail. To end your adventure, you could take a picture in the gelatinous cube where you were unlikely to survive. Rest in peace. Things I liked. The variety of food and beverage options for each fandom that took special care on both the appearance and quality is something I feel Universal excels at. While very few options were good for people with dietary restrictions, The expansive menu meant there was likely something for everyone. Not to sound like a broken record, but the level of detail on sets, props, and costuming was above and beyond for an event lasting 14 days. I want other theme parks to take note of what an immersive event can look like. Later in the evening, you were more likely to get more intimate experience with the cast on walkthroughs like Red Alert and Secrets of Waterdeep. Things I didn't like. There was an extremely loud DJ blasting in the center of multiple attractions. It made me very uncomfortable, and we would walk the long way around just to avoid the sound blast. While the lines for rides were much shorter, with it being an after-hours event, they closed too early, and you had to make a tough decision of waiting in shorter lines for FanFest experiences when it first opened, or to go on rides. Now that we've talked about both Star Wars Night and Universal FanFest, let's compare the two. While both were after-hours events, their approach and price points felt drastically different. Starting with the similarities. They both had new themed food options sprinkled throughout the parks that were fairly reasonable in price. The higher costs came from the alcoholic cocktails and soft drinks. While Disneyland is usually pretty good about having lots of inclusive food options for those with dietary restrictions, both parks opted to have fewer options in meatless and gluten-free meals. Disney and Universal had a lot of new merchandise available for average prices. I anticipated major upcharges, especially with the current economic environment, but I was pleasantly surprised that I could buy a souvenir without breaking the bank. For some reason, both after-hours events really wanted to have a DJ playing, but at least Disneyland had it in a contained area. I'm not sure why this is a trend, considering I never really see anyone out on the dance floor, and it seems more of a harm than a help. I love a good excuse to dance, but there's a time and a place for it. Also, both parks had pretty similar costume guidelines. But Universal lets you cosplay specific characters if you like. As always, you can never pretend to be a cast member. The parking prices for general parking and preferred parking are the same between the parks. While Universal normally has a $10 fee after 5 p.m., they changed it for FanFest, so the prices were $35 and $55 respectively. The accessibility is pretty similar for both parks. While Disneyland has the upper hand just because of its longer history and better layout, you'll find a similar level of care. Expect loud sounds, strobing lights, crowds, and lots of walking. Luckily, I didn't have an issue finding seating when I really needed it. These are both visually and auditorily intense events, so extra precaution is advised. Now for the differences. There seemed to be a pretty drastic method for getting their target audiences for a family-friendly event. While Star Wars and Disney cast a large net for all ages because of its decades of content, FanFest felt like it was forcing its age diversity by putting on a disjointed experience with too many wildly different fandoms, targeting older crowds with the nostalgia of Star Trek and Back to the Future while getting younger crowds with anime. Of course, the extensive alcoholic menu led itself to a more 21-plus crowd at FanFest, while Star Wars Night was almost exclusively adults just because of the high ticket price. If you were looking for completely new content and immersive experiences, Universal had the upper hand. Disney had lots of new photo ops, characters, food, and mini shows, but it paled in comparison to the brand new walkthroughs displayed at FanFest. The amount of work put into making Universal's new after-hours show was far more apparent than what Disney put forth. Disney relied almost solely on the brand recognition and the fans who would pay for anything they offer. Universal created something you cannot get anything similar to in their park and brought new people in just for its one-of-a-kind nature. The price points were also very different with their events. Star Wars Night was more than double the price for way less new content than what FanFest offered. Overall, I would love to go back to a Disney After Dark event, just for the no lines and no set experience, even if it's more expensive. But I'd probably skip out on the Star Wars Night next time. For a completely new experience at a much better price point, I'm heading to another Universal FanFest. I might even go multiple times if they bring out more Dungeons & Dragons. As far as immersive experiences go, FanFest did a much broader design, and I hope they learn from their mistakes in the future. Until next time, cutting corners leads to unfulfilled lifetimes. website, immersivexps.com, to join our free Ko-fi, which will have visuals and additional content of the immersive experiences discussed in each episode. If you are an immersive experience artist or creator, no matter how small, consider contacting us so you can take part on a future podcast. This podcast is recorded and produced by SoCal Podcast Studio in Orange County. Thanks for listening. Sorry, I'm a little snarky about the whole magic key thing. I used to have one and it's not as promised, so I recently won money from 2 settlements Disney lost to people who all got pissed off about it, which is honestly shocking because Disneyland never loses in court. That's my little rant. Hey, but I got $69 and $22.